The instructors at Blackwood Military Training Complex called it the graveyard of egos, a 4,200-meter range where even elite snipers failed spectacularly. We'd seen seasoned marksmen miss by hundreds of meters, their reputations shattered against the Nevada desert's unforgiving mathematics. Then one quiet afternoon, an unassuming woman in worn fatigue stepped up to that impossible line, and with a single squeeze of the trigger, she made every instructor freeze in stunned silence as the distant target exploded in a cloud of smoke. And metal dot before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on Blackwood Military Training Complex, its rays creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the endless expanse of desert. Staff Sergeant Kate Sullivan squinted through her scope, watching the morning training session unfold with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen it all. At 26, she was already considered one of the Army's finest marksmanship instructors, her reputation built on an uncanny ability to push recruits beyond their perceived limitations. Sullivan's range, as the other instructors called it, was her domain, a meticulously organized kingdom of precision where every shot mattered and every miss taught a lesson. The main training area stretched out before her like a carefully choreographed dance floor with targets positioned at various distances: 300 meters for the beginners, 800 for the intermediate shooters, 1,200 for the advanced marksmen, and finally, the legendary 4,200-meter range that had earned its nickname as the graveyard of egos. That final range was Kate's personal obsession. In 3 years of running advanced sniper training, she'd never seen anyone successfully engage a target at that distance. The mathematics alone were staggering. At 4,200 meters, a sniper had to account for bullet drop measured in stories, wind drift that could push a projectile dozens of feet off course, the Earth's rotation, temperature variations, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. It was less shooting than it was applied physics, requiring calculations that most soldiers couldn't even comprehend, let alone execute under pressure. Her current class of recruits was typical of the advanced program: 4 soldiers who'd already proven themselves exceptional marksmen at conventional ranges, now hungry to push into the realm of extreme precision shooting. Private Lucas Webb, 24, was the analytical perfectionist of the group, a former engineering student who approached every shot like a mathematical equation. His notebook was filled with ballistic charts, environmental calculations, and meticulously recorded data from every training session. Private Taylor Stone, the unit's technology specialist, never went anywhere without a tablet loaded with ballistic calculators, weather monitoring apps, and digital rangefinders. At 22, Taylor had grown up in the digital age and believed that superior technology could overcome any shooting challenge. The collection of electronic gadgets attached to Taylor's gear rivaled that of most professional hunters. Private Danny Park provided the comic relief that every unit needed. His quick wit and spot-on impressions of their commanding officers kept morale high during the grueling training sessions. But beneath the humor was a naturally gifted shooter, whose instinctive understanding of windage and elevation often surprised even Kate. Danny had a farmer's intuition about weather patterns and environmental conditions that no amount of formal training could replicate. The youngest member of their group, Private Riley Foster, had just turned 20, but possessed the kind of steady nerves and natural hand-eye coordination that made seasoned instructors take notice. Riley rarely spoke during training sessions, preferring to observe, learn, and then execute with a precision that belied such limited experience. There was something old soul about Riley's approach to shooting, patient, methodical, almost meditative. "All right, listen up," Kate called out, her voice carrying easily across the range despite the desert wind. "Today we're going to talk about the reality of extreme long-range shooting. I want each of you to take 3 shots at the 2,400-meter target. This isn't about hitting the bullseye. It's about understanding your limitations and the variables you're dealing with. The recruits moved to their positions with the confidence of soldiers who'd mastered every previous challenge Kate had thrown at them. She watched Lucas methodically calculating environmental factors, Taylor consulting multiple apps for wind speed and direction, Danny making subtle jokes to ease his own tension, and Riley simply settling into a shooting stance. With quiet focus, the first round of shots went about as Kate expected. Lucas came closest, his calculated approach getting him within 2 feet of the target. Impressive by most standards, but still a clear miss at combat distances. Taylor's reliance on technology resulted in a shot that was mathematically perfect for the conditions 3 minutes earlier, but failed to account for the constantly shifting desert winds. Danny's instinctive shooting actually outperformed the high-tech approach, landing within 4 feet of center mass. Riley's shot, while not the closest, demonstrated the kind of consistent technique that suggested real potential for long range work. Not bad for your first attempts at this distance, Kate acknowledged, making notes on her clipboard. But I want you to understand something important. What you just attempted, 2,400 meters, is considered exceptional long-range shooting by military standards. Most sniper engagements in recent conflicts have been under 800 meters. What you accomplished today would be considered remarkable in real combat situations. She gestured toward the far end of the range, where a barely visible speck marked the location of the 4,200-meter target. That target out there represents the absolute theoretical limit of what's possible with conventional small arms. The longest confirmed sniper kill in military history was just over 3,500 meters, achieved by a Canadian Special Forces sniper using a specialized .50 caliber rifle under perfect conditions with a trained spotter team. Lucas raised his hand. Sergeant Sullivan, has anyone ever successfully engaged the 4,200-meter target here at Blackwood? Kate shook her head with a slight smile. In 3 years of running this program, I've seen master sergeants with 20 years of sniper experience. Special operations veterans, even a few guys who held national shooting records. The closest anyone's come is about 200 meters off target. Most shots don't even get close enough to tell where they hit. So it's basically impossible? Danny asked, his usual humor tempered by genuine curiosity. Not impossible, Kate corrected. Just impractical. The variables at that distance are so numerous and constantly changing that even if you made a perfect shot, environmental conditions could shift during the bullet's flight time and throw you completely off target. We keep it as a training tool to teach humility and respect for the mathematics involved in extreme precision shooting. Taylor looked up from the tablet. What about specialized ammunition, advanced optics, computer-assisted targeting systems? All helpful, Kate acknowledged, but there's still a human element that technology can't replace. At 4,200 meters, you're not just shooting a rifle, you're conducting an orchestra of physics, psychology, and pure skill. The slightest tremor in your trigger pull, the smallest miscalculation in wind speed, even your heartbeat can throw off a shot by dozens of meters. Riley, who rarely spoke during technical discussions, surprised everyone by asking, "Sergeant, do you think anyone could actually make that shot?" Kate considered the question seriously. Theoretically? Maybe, if you had perfect conditions, perfect equipment, perfect training, and perfect execution all at the same time. But I've never seen it, and I've trained with some of the best marksmen in the military. She gathered her equipment as the afternoon training session wound down. Tomorrow, we'll work on environmental factor calculations at extended ranges. Tonight, I want each of you to research historical long-range shots and think about what conditions would need to align for someone to successfully engage our 4,200-meter target. As the recruits packed up their gear and headed back to the barracks, Kate remained on the range for a few extra minutes as was her habit. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the desert, and in the distance, the impossible target sat like a silent challenge against the Nevada landscape. She'd built her reputation on pushing soldiers beyond their comfort zones, on proving that dedication and proper technique could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. But that 4,200-meter target remained her own personal reminder that some challenges were bigger than confidence in training. Some shots required something more, something she wasn't sure existed in the modern military. The desert wind picked up as evening approached, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of another scorching day tomorrow. Kate shouldered her rifle and began the walk back to the main complex, unaware that within 24 hours, everything she believed about impossible shots was about to be challenged by the most unlikely person imaginable. The next afternoon brought the kind of oppressive heat that made the Nevada desert feel like an oven set to broil. Kate was running her recruits through wind compensation drills at the 1,200-meter range when she first noticed the figure approaching from the main complex. At this distance, it was just a small silhouette moving slowly across the shimmering asphalt. But something about the deliberate pace caught her attention. "Maintain your positions," she called to her recruits who were in the middle of a competitive shooting exercise. Lucas and Taylor were locked in a friendly rivalry over who could achieve more consistent groupings, while Danny provided running commentary that had Riley struggling not to laugh. The easy camaraderie of the group was one of the things Kate enjoyed most about advanced training. These soldiers had moved beyond proving themselves and could focus on genuine improvement. As the figure drew closer, Kate could make out more details. It was a woman, probably in her 50s, wearing desert camouflage fatigues that had seen better decades. Her gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and she carried herself with the measured gait of someone who'd learned to conserve energy in harsh environments. What struck Kate most was how utterly unremarkable she appeared. Average height, slight build, the kind of person who could disappear in a crowd of 3. The woman approached the range barrier and stood quietly, observing the training session with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Kate noticed she carried no visible identification, no name tape on her uniform, no rank insignia that would indicate her place in the military hierarchy. In an environment where everyone's credentials were clearly displayed, the anonymity was unusual enough to be noteworthy. "Sergeant, you've got a visitor," Danny called out, having spotted the newcomer during a break between shots. His tone carried the kind of playful curiosity that suggested he was already formulating jokes about their mysterious observer. Kate approached the woman with professional courtesy, though something about the stranger's presence felt oddly significant. "Ma'am, I'm Staff Sergeant Sullivan. Can I help you with something?" The woman studied Kate for a moment before responding. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume to be heard. "Master Sergeant Maria Delgado, I was hoping to observe your training session, if that's acceptable." "Of course, Master Sergeant," Kate replied, automatically deferring to the higher rank. "We're working on environmental compensation for extended range shooting. Are you here for an inspection or evaluation?" "Just observing," Delgado replied. "Simply, I have some experience with long-range work. I'm curious about current training methods." Kate noticed that Delgado's uniform bore no unit patches, no deployment ribbons, no awards or decorations that would typically indicate a career's worth of military service. For a master sergeant, the absence of such markers was unusual enough to raise questions, but Kate's training in military courtesy prevented her from asking directly. The recruits had paused their shooting to observe the interaction, their curiosity evident. Lucas, ever the analyst, was studying Delgado with the same intensity he applied to ballistic calculations. Taylor had discreetly pulled out a phone, probably running a search on the name, though Kate doubted any useful information would surface. Danny was whispering something to Riley that was clearly meant to be humorous, but was being delivered with uncharacteristic restraint. "Master Sergeant, would you like to see what we're working on today?" Kate offered, gesturing toward the 1,200-meter targets. "We're focusing on reading environmental conditions and making real-time adjustments for wind and temperature variations." Delgado nodded and followed Kate to the observation area, where she watched the recruits complete their shooting exercise with intense focus. Kate found herself studying the woman's reactions, looking for some indication of her background or expertise. Delgado's eyes tracked each shot with the kind of precision that suggested extensive familiarity with ballistics, and she occasionally nodded in what appeared to be approval of technique or criticism of form. "Your students show good fundamentals," Delgado observed as the exercise concluded. "Solid breathing control, consistent trigger discipline. The young one has natural instincts for reading environmental conditions," she added, indicating Danny with a slight gesture. Kate felt a surge of professional pride at the compliment, but also curiosity about how quickly and accurately Delgado had assessed her recruits' abilities. "Thank you, Master Sergeant. They're an exceptional group. We've been working towards some challenging long-range scenarios." "How challenging?" Delgado asked, and something in her tone suggested the question carried more weight than casual interest. Kate gestured toward the far end of the range, where the 4,200-meter target was barely visible as a speck against the desert landscape. "We have targets out to 4,200 meters, though I'll be honest, that one's more of a teaching tool than a practical shooting exercise. It demonstrates the limits of what's possible with conventional equipment and training." Delgado's gaze followed Kate's gesture, and for a moment, her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. It was the look of someone recognizing an old friend or remembering a significant moment. "Interesting distance," she said quietly. "Have any of your students attempted it?" "A few have tried," Kate admitted. "But success at that range requires perfect conditions, perfect equipment, and perfect execution all simultaneously. In 3 years of training here, no one's even come close." "Perfect conditions," Delgado repeated thoughtfully. "What would you consider perfect conditions for a shot like that?" Kate found herself drawn into the technical discussion despite her curiosity about Delgado's background. Minimal wind, stable temperature, clear atmosphere, target illumination. Proper ammunition temperature, barrel harmonics optimized for the specific load. Even then, you'd need to account for Coriolis effect, air density variations, humidity changes during flight time. It's more physics experiment than practical marksmanship. Delgado listened to the explanation with the kind of attention that suggested she was evaluating Kate's understanding rather than learning new information. "And equipment? What would be optimal?" "Specialized long-range rifle, probably .338 Lapua Magnum or .50 BMG. High magnification optics with ballistic compensation. Precision-loaded ammunition matched to the specific rifle. Environmental monitoring. Equipment, ideally a trained spotter with range-finding capabilities." Kate warmed to the subject, enjoying the opportunity to discuss the technical challenges with someone who seemed genuinely interested. "Impressive analysis," Delgado said. "You've clearly given this considerable thought." The recruits had finished cleaning their weapons and were packing up their equipment, but Kate noticed they were moving slowly, clearly hoping to overhear more of the conversation with their mysterious visitor. Danny in particular seemed fascinated by Delgado, though. His usual stream of commentary had been replaced by uncharacteristic silence. "Master Sergeant," Kate ventured, "if you don't mind my asking, what's your background with long-range shooting? Your question suggests considerable experience." Delgado was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant target. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that suggested memories Kate couldn't begin to imagine. "I've had occasion to work at extended ranges. Different era, different equipment, different circumstances." The non-answer was clearly intentional. But rather than frustration, Kate felt growing respect for someone who understood the value of discretion. In the special operations community, there were always stories that couldn't be told, missions that officially never happened, people whose service records were classified indefinitely. "Would you be interested in observing tomorrow's session?" Kate asked. "We're planning to work on team coordination for multiple target engagement. Nothing as ambitious as the 4,200-meter range, but some challenging scenarios." Delgado considered the invitation carefully. "What time do you typically begin?" 0800 hours for equipment check. Range time starts at 0830. "I'll be here," Delgado said simply. She turned to leave, then paused. "Sergeant Sullivan, that 4,200-meter target. When was the last time someone attempted it?" Kate thought for a moment. "About 6 weeks ago. Master Sergeant Williams from the Special Operations Command was here for an advanced course. 22 years of sniper experience, multiple combat deployments. He missed by about 150 meters, which was actually the closest anyone's come." Delgado nodded thoughtfully. 150 meters, respectable attempt. As she walked away, Kate found herself watching the small figure recede into the desert heat shimmer. There had been something in Delgado's tone when discussing the impossible shot, something that suggested familiarity with challenges that most soldiers would never face. "Sergeant," Lucas called out as the recruits approached with their packed equipment. "Who was that? There's something different about her." Kate looked back toward the main complex, where Delgado had disappeared among the buildings. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "But I have a feeling tomorrow's training session is going to be more interesting than usual." Danny, finally finding his voice again, added, "Did anyone else notice she was studying that 4,200-meter target like she was planning something?" Riley, who rarely offered opinions, surprised everyone by saying, "She moves like someone who's been in places where making noise gets you killed." Kate felt a chill despite the desert heat. Whatever Master Sergeant Maria Delgado's story was, it was clearly more complex than a simple training observation. And something about the way she'd looked at that impossible target suggested that tomorrow's session might challenge everything Kate thought she knew about the limits of human marksmanship. Master Sergeant Delgado arrived at exactly 0800 hours, appearing at the range entrance with the same quiet precision that had marked her previous visit. Kate noticed she carried a rifle case this time, a battered olive drab container that looked like it had survived multiple deployments. The case bore no manufacturer markings, no unit identifications, just the kind of anonymous functionality that suggested serious professional use. "Good morning, Master Sergeant," Kate greeted her as the recruits finished their equipment checks. "I'm glad you decided to join us today." "Thank you for the invitation," Delgado replied. She set down her rifle case and observed the morning routine with the same intense focus Kate had noticed the day before. The recruits were clearly curious about their mysterious observer, but military courtesy kept their questions unspoken. Kate had planned a progression of exercises designed to challenge her students without overwhelming them, starting with 800-meter precision shots, moving to 1,500-meter environmental compensation work, and finishing with team coordination drills at various distances. It was a demanding but achievable program that would push her recruits while building confidence. "Today we're focusing on real-world application scenarios," Kate announced to her students. "You'll be working in pairs, with one shooter and one spotter, rotating positions every 3 rounds. The goal is to develop the kind of communication and trust that's essential for effective long-range work." Lucas and Taylor paired up immediately, their complementary skills making them natural partners. Danny and Riley formed the second team, with Danny's instinctive feel for environmental conditions balancing Riley's methodical precision. Kate had learned that these partnerships often produced better results than individual shooting. As each soldier's strengths compensated for their partner's weaknesses, the morning exercises went smoothly. with both teams demonstrating significant improvement over their previous performances. Kate found herself dividing her attention between coaching her students and observing Delgado's reactions to their work. The Master Sergeant watched each shot with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was evaluating more than just marksmanship. She seemed to be assessing character, decision-making under pressure, and the intangible qualities that separated competent soldiers from exceptional ones. During a break between exercises, Delgado approached Kate with a question. "That would change everything. Sergeant Sullivan, would it be possible to examine that 4,200-meter target more closely?" Kate was surprised by the request. "Of course, Master Sergeant. We can drive out there if you'd like to see the setup." "That won't be necessary," Delgado said, opening her rifle case for the first time. "I was thinking of a more direct examination." The rifle that emerged from the case was unlike anything Kate had seen in current military service. It appeared to be a heavily modified precision rifle, probably built on a custom action, with a barrel that looked hand-lapped and a stock that showed the kind of wear that came from serious field use. The scope was an older model, high quality but not the latest technology, and the entire weapon had the appearance of something that had been carefully optimized for a specific purpose. "Master Sergeant," Kate said carefully, "that's a 4,200-meter shot. The conditions today aren't ideal. We've got variable winds, temperature fluctuations, and atmospheric haze. Even with perfect equipment and technique, the probability of success is extremely low." Delgado finished assembling her rifle with movements that spoke of decades of practice. "I understand the challenges involved." The recruits had gathered closer, their training exercises forgotten in the face of this unexpected development. Kate could see the skepticism in their expressions, mixed with curiosity about what their mysterious observer was planning to attempt. "Ma'am," Lucas said respectfully, "I've run the calculations for shots at that distance. With current environmental conditions, we're looking at bullet drop measured in multiple stories, wind drift of 30 to 40 feet, and a flight time of over 6 seconds. That's assuming perfect conditions, which we don't have today." Delgado looked at Lucas with what might have been approval. "Your analysis is correct. Those are significant challenges." Danny, emboldened by Lucas's technical approach, added his own concerns. "Master Sergeant, I don't mean any disrespect, but that target has humbled some seriously experienced shooters. Master Sergeant Williams missed by 150 meters, and he's got 22 years of sniper experience." "I'm aware of Master Sergeant Williams' attempt," Delgado replied quietly. "I'm also aware of the attempts by Staff Sergeant Morrison, Gunnery Sergeant Chun, and Lieutenant Colonel Bradford. All excellent marksmen, all unsuccessful." Kate felt a chill of realization. Delgado knew about shooting attempts that Kate had never mentioned, including classified training sessions that weren't part of official records. Whoever this woman was, she had access to information that suggested connections far above Kate's clearance level. "Master Sergeant," Kate said, her voice carrying the weight of responsibility, "I have to ask, are you certain you want to attempt this? A missed shot at that distance could raise questions about judgment, and frankly, the odds are heavily against success." Delgado shouldered her rifle and moved toward the firing line. "Sergeant Sullivan, in my experience, the most important shots are often the ones where the odds are heavily against success." The recruits positioned themselves at the observation area, their earlier skepticism replaced by nervous anticipation. Kate found herself torn between professional curiosity and concern. For Delgado's reputation, the 4,200-meter target had become legendary precisely because it was beyond the reach of conventional marksmanship, and watching someone fail at an impossible shot was never comfortable. Regardless of their rank or experience, Taylor pulled out a tablet and began running environmental calculations. "Master Sergeant, current wind speed is variable between 8 and 12 knots from the northwest. Temperature is 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity at 23%. Barometric pressure steady at 29.92 inches. Would you like more detailed readings? Thank you, but that won't be necessary, Delgado replied, settling into her shooting position with fluid precision. Kate noticed that her stance was slightly different from standard military doctrine, more compact, more stable, optimized for situations where perfection mattered more than speed. The master sergeant spent several minutes studying the target. Through her scope, making minute adjustments to her position and breathing pattern. Kate had seen this kind of preparation before, but usually only from the most elite marksmen, and even then, rarely with such methodical calm. Riley, who had been quiet throughout the morning, suddenly spoke up. "Master Sergeant, why are you really here?" The question hung in the desert air like a challenge. Delgado lowered her rifle slightly and looked at the young soldier with something that might have been respect. "That's an excellent question, Private Foster. I'm here because some capabilities are too important to be lost to bureaucracy and assumptions about what's possible." She returned to her shooting position, and Kate realized that whatever was about to happen would be more than just a marksmanship demonstration. This was about proving something, to herself, to them, or to some authority that Kate couldn't even imagine. "Range is clear," Kate announced automatically, though she wondered if she was about to witness either a spectacular vindication or a very public failure. "Shooter, you are cleared to fire when ready." Delgado's breathing became controlled and rhythmic. Her trigger finger found its position with the kind of muscle memory that comes from thousands of repetitions. The desert fell silent except for the distant sound of wind across the landscape and the barely audible hum of heat rising from the sand. And in that moment of perfect stillness, Kate realized that she was about to witness something that would fundamentally change her understanding of what was possible in the realm of human performance. The crack of Delgado's rifle split the desert silence like thunder, the sound echoing off the distant mountains and rolling across the training complex with the authority of something significant happening. Kate instinctively started her stopwatch. At 4,200 meters, the bullet would take approximately 6.2 seconds to reach the target. Assuming it maintained sufficient velocity and trajectory to travel that distance at all. The recruits stood frozen in place, their eyes straining to see across the impossible distance to where the target waited like a distant mirage. Kate raised her binoculars, focusing on the barely visible speck that represented humanity's challenge to the laws of physics and probability. Through the shimmering heat waves, the target seemed to waver like something that might not even exist. 5 seconds passed. 6 seconds, 7 dot, and then, at 6.8 seconds after the rifle's report, the target erupted. Even at 4,200 meters, the explosion was visible, a sudden bloom of smoke, dust, and debris that marked the complete destruction of what had been considered an impossible challenge. The reactive target, designed to provide unmistakable confirmation of a hit, had detonated with the kind of violence that left no room for doubt or measurement error. The silence that followed was more profound than the silence before the shot. It was the silence of minds trying to process something that contradicted everything they understood about the limitations of human capability. Kate found herself staring through her binoculars at the dissipating smoke cloud, her brain struggling to accept what her eyes had witnessed. "Jesus Christ," Danny whispered, his voice barely audible but carrying clearly in the stunned quiet. She actually did it. Lucas had gone pale, his analytical mind racing through calculations that suddenly seemed inadequate. "That's impossible. The mathematics alone, the variables, the environmental factors, the equipment limitations, that shot shouldn't exist." Taylor was frantically working on the tablet, running ballistic calculations with shaking fingers. "According to every program, I have the probability of success under current conditions was less than 1%. Less than 1%, and she made it look routine." Riley, characteristically direct, asked the question they were all thinking. "Master Sergeant, how Delgado calmly ejected the spent cartridge, the brass casing clinking against the concrete, firing platform with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the aftermath of the impossible. She safed her rifle and set it aside with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the morning. Physics, she said simply. Mathematics, experience, and understanding that impossible is often just another word for requiring perfect execution. Kate lowered her binoculars, her hands trembling slightly. In 15 years of military service, including deployments, with some of the Army's most elite units, she had never witnessed anything approaching what she'd just seen. The longest confirmed kill shot in military history was 3,540 meters, achieved by a Canadian Special Forces sniper under ideal conditions, with a specialized weapon system and dedicated spotter team. What Delgado had just accomplished exceeded that record by over 600 meters, achieved alone with equipment that looked decades old. "Master Sergeant," Kate said, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil, "I need to ask you directly, what is your actual background? That shot isn't just exceptional, it's historically significant. It represents a level of marksmanship that shouldn't be possible with conventional training and equipment." Delgado began packing her rifle back into its worn case. "I had good teachers, and circumstances that required learning to make shots that mattered, regardless of the mathematical probability of success." The non-answer was clearly intentional. But Kate's training in dealing with classified personnel told her that pushing for details would be both inappropriate and futile. Instead, she focused on the immediate implications of what had just occurred. "Master Sergeant, that shot needs to be documented, verified. The ballistic data alone could revolutionize long-range shooting doctrine. The techniques, the environmental compensation methods, the equipment specifications. This could change how we train marksmen across all branches of service." "No," Delgado said quietly, but with unmistakable finality. "It doesn't need to be documented." Kate felt a surge of frustration. "Ma'am, with respect, what you just accomplished represents a breakthrough in human performance. This isn't about personal recognition. It's about advancing military capabilities, improving training methods, potentially saving lives in future conflicts." Delgado finished packing her equipment and stood, her slight frame somehow commanding, despite her unremarkable appearance. "Sergeant Sullivan, some capabilities exist precisely because they're not documented, not studied, not turned into doctrine that can be countered or anticipated." Lucas stepped forward, his scientific mind unable to let the matter rest. "Master Sergeant, the ballistic mathematics alone, the calculations required to compensate for all the environmental variables at that distance. How did you process all that information without computer assistance, without environmental monitoring equipment, without a spotter team?" "Experience," Delgado replied, "and understanding that computers can calculate probabilities, but they can't account for will, intuition, and the ability to adapt to conditions that aren't in any manual." Danny, still struggling to process what he'd witnessed, managed to find his voice. "Ma'am, who taught you to shoot like that? Where did you learn techniques that can achieve the impossible?" For the first time since Kate had met her, Delgado's composed facade showed a crack. Something passed across her features, grief, pride, loss, and determination all mixed together in an expression that spoke of memories too complex to explain and too painful to forget. People who believe that some knowledge is worth preserving, even when the cost of learning it is higher than anyone should have to pay, she said quietly. People who understood that impossible situations require impossible solutions, and that sometimes the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure comes down to one person's ability to achieve what everyone else considers impossible. Taylor looked up from the tablet, where ballistic calculations covered the screen in rows of numbers that didn't seem to account for what they'd just witnessed. "Master Sergeant, those people who taught you, are they still active? Are these techniques being taught elsewhere?" Delgado shouldered her rifle case and looked out across the desert toward where the target had been. No, Private Stone, they're not still active. And no, these techniques aren't being taught elsewhere. Which is why today was important. Kate felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place, though the complete picture remained frustratingly unclear. Master Sergeant, why here? Why now? Why demonstrate these capabilities to a routine training class? Because sometimes legends need to be more than stories, Delgado replied. Sometimes they need to be witnessed, understood, and remembered by people who might be called upon to achieve the impossible themselves. She began walking toward the main complex, leaving Kate and her recruits standing in stunned silence beside the firing line. The desert wind had picked up, erasing the evidence of the morning's activities, except for the distant cloud of dust that still marked where the impossible target had been. Master Sergeant, Kate called after her, will we see you again? Delgado paused without turning around. That depends on whether you understand what you witnessed today and what you choose to do with that understanding. As her figure disappeared into the heat shimmer, Kate realized that the morning's training session had become something far more significant than marksmanship instruction. They had witnessed a demonstration of human capability that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible, delivered by someone whose background remained as mysterious as her methods. And somewhere in the back of Kate's mind, a single word began to echo with growing certainty: legend. The mess hall at Blackwood Military Training Complex buzzed with an energy that Kate had never experienced before. Word of the impossible shot had spread through the base like wildfire, but not in the way she had anticipated. Instead of awe and curiosity, she encountered skepticism, mockery, and the kind of knowing smiles that suggested her credibility was being quietly dismantled. Sullivan's got herself a fish story now, she overheard Master Sergeant Rick Coleman saying to a table of instructors. 4,200 meters with some mystery woman and an antique rifle. Next thing you know, she'll be claiming aliens helped with the wind calculations. The laughter that followed felt like sandpaper against Kate's professional pride. She had built her reputation on accuracy, precision, and honest reporting. To have her integrity questioned over something she had witnessed with her own eyes was more painful than any physical injury she'd sustained in 2 combat deployments. Captain Derek Foster, the senior training officer, made his position clear during the afternoon briefing. I want to address the rumors circulating about yesterday's alleged shooting demonstration, he announced to the assembled instructors. Let me be absolutely clear. No shot has ever been successfully completed at 4,200 meters on this range. The physics alone make such a claim highly questionable. Kate felt heat rising in her cheeks as Foster continued. I understand that sometimes training scenarios can be misinterpreted. Environmental factors can create illusions, and competitive pressure can lead to exaggerated claims. However, it's important that we maintain professional standards and realistic expectations about human performance capabilities. The implication was clear without being stated directly. Kate had either been deceived by some elaborate trick or was deliberately exaggerating what had occurred. Either way, her judgment was being questioned at the highest levels of the training command. Her recruits faced their own version of professional ridicule. Lucas found himself subjected to detailed questioning about his mathematical calculations, with senior instructors suggesting that his analysis was flawed or that he had been influenced by wishful thinking. Son, Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes told him during an impromptu counseling session, advanced mathematics doesn't change the laws of physics. If you're going to build a career on precision, you need to distinguish between what you hope happened and what actually occurred. Taylor's technological approach came under similar scrutiny. The ballistic programs on the tablet showed conclusively that success at 4,200 meters under the previous day's conditions should have been mathematically impossible, which led several instructors to suggest that the equipment had malfunctioned or been tampered with. Technology is only as reliable as the person operating it, Captain Foster pointed out during Taylor's performance review. Garbage in, garbage out. Danny found his usual humor had deserted him entirely. The casual camaraderie that had always characterized his interactions with other soldiers was replaced by uncomfortable silences and barely concealed eye rolls whenever he mentioned the shot. His attempts to describe what he had witnessed were met with the kind of patient tolerance typically reserved for elaborate practical jokes or obvious exaggerations. Riley, characteristically direct, took a different approach. Instead of trying to convince skeptics, the young soldier began conducting quiet research, spending hours in the base library and computer lab trying to find historical precedents for extreme long-range shooting. If such capabilities existed, Riley reasoned, there would be records, documentation, some trace of similar achievements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The breaking point came during a base-wide training meeting where Colonel Michael Torres, the commanding officer, addressed what he termed unrealistic expectations and unprofessional claims in current marksmanship training. Though he never mentioned Kate by name, his comments were clearly directed at the previous day's events. Excellence in marksmanship comes from disciplined training, realistic goal setting, and honest assessment of capabilities, Torres announced to the assembled personnel. It does not come from chasing fantasies or allowing wishful thinking to override professional judgment. I expect all training personnel to maintain the highest standards of accuracy and truthfulness in their reporting. Kate sat in the back of the auditorium, feeling the weight of institutional disapproval settling around her like a suffocating blanket. Her career, built on 15 years of exemplary service, was being quietly undermined by an event that she knew had occurred exactly as she reported it. That evening, Lucas approached Kate's quarters with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he had discovered something significant. "Sergeant Sullivan, I need to show you something. Can we talk privately?" In Kate's small office, Lucas opened his laptop and displayed a series of documents that made Kate's breath catch. "I've been researching extreme long-range shooting records, trying to find historical precedents for what we witnessed. Most of the information is classified or heavily redacted, but I found references to something called Operation Desert Viper." The documents on Lucas's screen were fragments, partial after-action reports, personnel records with names blacked out, equipment requisitions for specialized ammunition and optics. But even the limited information available painted a picture of military operations that had pushed the boundaries of conventional warfare. "Look at this," Lucas said, highlighting a partially visible section of text. "This appears to be from a mission report dated 2007. It mentions unprecedented long-range elimination capabilities and ballistic techniques, previously considered theoretical. The distances mentioned are all classified, but the context suggests they exceeded conventional doctrine by significant margins." Kate studied the screen, her mind racing. "Lucas, where did you access these documents? Some of this looks like it should be well above your clearance level." "That's the interesting part," Lucas replied. "These documents aren't classified anymore. They've been declassified recently, but they're buried so deep in the archives that nobody's really paying attention to them. It's like someone wanted them to be technically available, but practically invisible." He clicked to another document, this one showing a grainy photograph of soldiers in desert camouflage. Most of the image was obscured or redacted, but Kate could make out what appeared to be a woman holding a rifle that looked remarkably similar to the weapon Delgado had used. "The unit designation was Shadow Strike Team," Lucas continued. "All-female Special Operations Unit, deployed primarily in Iraq during the height of the insurgency. Their specialty appears to have been elimination of high-value targets in urban environments where conventional assets couldn't operate effectively." Kate felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to align in her mind. What happened to this unit? Lucas's expression grew grim. According to the limited information available, Shadow Strike Team was disbanded in 2008, following heavy casualties during a classified operation. Most personnel records are sealed indefinitely, but the few details that have been released suggest that the survivors were reassigned to non-combat roles or medically retired. Any names? Kate asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Everything's redacted, Lucas confirmed. But there are references to call signs. Someone designated Phantom appears to have been the team leader. The reports suggest she was responsible for some of the most extreme long-range eliminations in the unit's history. Kate stared at the screen, remembering Delgado's reaction when she had mentioned her own background with long-range work. Different era, different equipment, different circumstances, she had said. Now those words carried new meaning. Lucas, Kate said slowly, I think we need to be very careful about how we proceed with this research. If Master Sergeant Delgado is connected to this unit, if she's been living under a different identity for 15 years, then there are probably very good reasons why her background has been classified. Lucas nodded, understanding the implications. So what do we do? Pretend we never saw the shot? Accept that everyone thinks we're either lying or delusional. Kate considered the question carefully. The easy path would be to let the matter drop, to accept the institutional skepticism and move on with their careers. But something about Delgado's final words nagged at her. Sometimes legends need to be more than stories. We keep investigating, Kate decided. Quietly, carefully, but we keep looking for answers. Because if we're right about who she is, then what we witnessed wasn't just an impossible shot. It was a message. 3 days of meticulous research had transformed Lucas's laptop into a digital detective's bulletin board, filled with cross-reference documents, timeline analyses, and connection maps that would have impressed intelligence professionals. Working in shifts with Taylor, Danny, and Riley, they had managed to piece together fragments of a story that official records seemed determined to keep buried. I found something, Riley announced during one of their late-night research sessions in Kate's quarters. The youngest recruit had proven surprisingly adept at navigating military databases, approaching the search with the kind of methodical patience that older soldiers often lacked. Riley's screen displayed a medical discharge report from 2008, heavily redacted but containing enough visible information to be significant. Master Sergeant Maria E. Delgado, medical retirement following combat injuries sustained during classified operations. Look at the specialization codes. Kate leaned over Riley's shoulder to read the visible portions of the document. The military occupational specialty codes were partially obscured, but she could make out references to advanced marksmanship training, special operations certification, and multiple combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. The dates match, Taylor added, pulling up a parallel timeline on another screen. Shadow Strike Team was active from 2006 to 2008. Medical discharges for surviving members were processed between August and December 2008. Master Sergeant Delgado's discharge is dated September 15, 2008. Danny had been unusually quiet during their research sessions, but now he spoke up with the kind of insight that reminded Kate why she valued his instincts despite his casual demeanor. Look at the pattern of these discharges. They're all coded as medical retirements, but the injury descriptions are classified. That's not how normal medical discharges work. Usually, the medical reasons are documented in detail. Lucas nodded, his analytical mind following the same logical thread. It suggests these weren't normal medical retirements. They were administrative actions designed to remove personnel from active duty while protecting classified information about their capabilities and deployment history. Kate studied the documents spread across multiple screens, feeling the weight of discoveries that were both enlightening and troubling. So we're saying that Master Sergeant Delgado spent 15 years in unofficial retirement, living under her real identity, but without any recognition of her service record or capabilities. That's exactly what we're saying, Riley confirmed. And there's more. I found references to a training facility in Nevada where Shadow Strike Team conducted their advanced marksmanship development. The coordinates match Blackwood Military Training Complex. The revelation hit Kate like a physical blow. She's been here before. This base, this range, it's where she learned to make impossible shots. Taylor pulled up satellite imagery from 2007, showing the same desert landscape they trained on daily, but with different structures and target arrangements. The 4,200-meter range didn't exist during Shadow Strike Team's training period, but the geographical features are identical. She would have trained on this exact terrain, learned to read these wind patterns, memorized the environmental characteristics. Danny leaned back in his chair, the implications sinking in. So when she showed up 3 days ago, she wasn't just some random master sergeant observing our training. She was returning to the place where she became legend. Lucas had been working on a different aspect of the puzzle, cross-referencing personnel records with mission reports. I think I found the operation that ended Shadow Strike Team's deployment. It's designated Operation Silent Thunder, conducted in November 2008 in the Anbar province of Iraq. The mission summary was almost entirely redacted, but the fragments that remained visible painted a picture of extraordinary heroism and devastating loss. Kate could make out references to high-value target elimination, urban environment, compromised extraction, and most significantly, unprecedented long-range engagement. The casualty report is partially visible, Lucas continued, his voice heavy with the weight of military tragedy. Shadow Strike Team consisted of 6 operators. 5 were killed in action during the final mission. 1 was listed as missing in action, later presumed dead. Riley looked up from another document. But we just found Master Sergeant Delgado's medical discharge records. If she was presumed dead, how was she processed for medical retirement? Kate felt the pieces clicking into place with a clarity that was both satisfying and horrifying. Because she wasn't presumed dead by everyone. Someone in the chain of command knew she had survived, but for operational security reasons, her survival had to be classified. The easiest way to protect someone whose capabilities are too sensitive for public knowledge is to officially declare them dead while quietly facilitating their disappearance from active service. Taylor pulled up another document, this one showing equipment requisitions for Shadow Strike Team's final deployment. Look at the specialized ammunition and optics they were issued. Custom-loaded rounds for extreme range work, environmental monitoring equipment, communication gear for coordinated team operations. This wasn't standard special operations equipment. This was specifically designed for capabilities that didn't officially exist. Danny whistled softly as he read over the specifications. No wonder she could make that shot look routine. She had years of training with equipment and techniques that were literally classified above our security clearance level. Kate stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the desert where the impossible target had been destroyed 3 days earlier. So Master Sergeant Maria Delgado is actually the sole survivor of the most classified marksmanship unit in modern military history. She's been living in unofficial exile for 15 years. Carrying knowledge that the military considered too sensitive to acknowledge publicly. Which raises the question, Riley said quietly. Why did she choose to reveal herself now? Why demonstrate capabilities that were supposed to remain buried with her unit? Lucas had been thinking about the same question. Maybe because those capabilities are needed again. Maybe because current threats require solutions that conventional doctrine can't provide. Kate turned back to face her team, her mind racing through the implications of their discoveries. Or maybe because she's been watching military training standards decline and decided that the knowledge her team died protecting was too important to take to the grave. Taylor looked up from the laptop screen. Sergeant Sullivan, what do we do with this information? Do we report our findings up the chain of command? Do we try to contact Master Sergeant Delgado directly? Kate considered the options carefully. Each path carried significant risks. Revealing their knowledge could compromise Delgado's carefully maintained anonymity, but staying silent meant potentially wasting an opportunity to preserve capabilities that might be critical for future military operations. We keep researching, she decided, but we also start preparing ourselves for the possibility that Master Sergeant Delgado might contact us again. If she demonstrated those capabilities for a reason, if she's testing our worthiness to receive training that officially doesn't exist, then we need to be ready to prove ourselves worthy of that trust. Danny leaned forward, his expression unusually serious. And if we're wrong? If we're building an elaborate theory around coincidences and declassified fragments that don't actually tell the story we think they tell? Kate looked at each of her recruits in turn, seeing the mixture of excitement, uncertainty, and determination in their faces. Then we'll have learned valuable lessons about research, critical thinking, and the importance of questioning assumptions. But I don't think we're wrong. I think we've stumbled onto something that could change our understanding of what's possible in military operations. Riley closed the laptop and gathered the printed documents they had accumulated. So what's our next move? Kate smiled, feeling a sense of purpose that had been missing since the institutional skepticism had begun undermining her confidence. Tomorrow we go back to the range and train like our lives depend on achieving the impossible. Because if Master Sergeant Delgado is who we think she is, and if she decides we're worth teaching, we're going to need every bit of skill and dedication we can muster. Colonel Michael Torres appeared in Kate's office doorway at exactly 0700 hours, his expression unreadable but carrying the weight of command authority that made even experienced NCOs stand straighter. Behind him stood two individuals in civilian clothes who had the unmistakable bearing of intelligence personnel, sharp eyes, conservative dress, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from operating in classified environments. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, Torres said, closing the door behind the visitors. We need to discuss the events of 4 days ago, and more specifically, your subsequent research activities. Kate felt her stomach drop. Somehow their investigation into Delgado's background had been detected, monitored, and reported up channels that reached far beyond the training complex. Sir, if we've overstepped our authority in accessing classified materials, you haven't overstepped anything, Torres interrupted, settling into the chair across from Kate's desk. In fact, your initiative and discretion have been noted at levels considerably above my pay grade. One of the civilians, a woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair and intelligent eyes, spoke for the first time. Staff Sergeant Sullivan. I'm Deputy Director Janet Morrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Colonel James Wright from Special Operations Command. We're here because your research has uncovered information that certain parties have been hoping someone would discover. Kate felt confusion replacing her initial fear. Ma'am, I don't understand. Are we in trouble for investigating Master Sergeant Delgado's background? Colonel Wright answered, his voice carrying the gravitas of someone accustomed to briefing personnel on highly classified matters. Master Sergeant Maria Delgado is indeed the sole survivor of Shadow Strike Team, and yes, she has been living under administrative exile for 15 years. What you witnessed 4 days ago was not a random demonstration of marksmanship. It was a carefully orchestrated evaluation. Morrison opened a briefcase and removed a series of photographs and documents that made Kate's breath catch. They were surveillance images from the range, showing Delgado shot from multiple angles, along with detailed ballistic analysis that confirmed what Kate had witnessed but could barely believe. The shot was genuine, Morrison confirmed. 4,247 meters under variable wind conditions, using equipment that by conventional standards should have been inadequate for the task. Our analysis confirms that this represents the longest confirmed precision shot in military history. Torres leaned forward, his expression serious. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Operation Desert Viper was terminated not because of mission failure, but because the capabilities developed by Shadow Strike Team were considered too sensitive for conventional military application. Wright continued the explanation. The techniques they developed, extreme long-range elimination, urban environment target engagement, coordinated precision fire under impossible conditions, these capabilities were deemed strategically valuable enough to warrant complete classification. The surviving member was given a choice: permanent assignment to classified research and development, or administrative exile with full pension and benefits. Kate struggled to process the implications. She chose exile? She chose freedom, Morrison replied. Master Sergeant Delgado had watched her entire team die implementing techniques that she had helped develop. The psychological burden of that knowledge, combined with 15 years of combat deployments, made continued active service inadvisable. Torres pulled out another document, this one bearing current date stamps and high-level security classifications. However, recent geopolitical developments have created operational requirements that match exactly the capabilities that Shadow Strike Team possessed. We need those techniques. We need that knowledge. And we need someone willing and able to teach them to a new generation of operators. Wright's expression grew more serious. The problem is that Master Sergeant Delgado has declined every official request for cooperation over the past 3 years. She's made it clear through intermediaries that she will not work with government agencies, will not submit to debriefing, and will not allow her techniques to be studied or documented by official personnel. Morrison smiled slightly. However, she might be willing to work with soldiers she considers worthy of the knowledge. Soldiers who demonstrate the right combination of skill, character, and understanding of what service really means. Kate felt the pieces clicking into place. The demonstration 4 days ago, that was a test. That was the final phase of a test, Torres confirmed. Master Sergeant Delgado has been observing training operations at multiple installations over the past 6 months, evaluating personnel and capabilities. Your base was her final stop. Your reaction to her demonstration, your team's investigation into her background, your discretion in handling classified information, all of it was being monitored and evaluated. Wright opened his own folder, revealing assessment reports that documented every aspect of Kate's team's behavior over the previous week. Your recruits demonstrated exactly the qualities that Master Sergeant Delgado was looking for: intellectual curiosity, respect for classified information, loyalty to each other, and most importantly, the ability to accept that extraordinary claims might be true if supported by extraordinary evidence. Morrison leaned back in her chair. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, Master Sergeant Delgado has agreed to provide training in Shadow Strike Team techniques, but only to your specific team, only at this location, and only under conditions that protect her anonymity and preserve the classified nature of the capabilities involved. Kate felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Ma'am, what exactly are you asking me to do? Torres answered, his voice carrying the gravity of strategic importance. We're asking you to participate in a classified training program that will teach you and your recruits capabilities that officially don't exist. You'll learn techniques that could be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure in future special operations. But you'll also be sworn to secrecy about methods, personnel, and operational details that could compromise national security if disclosed. Wright added, the training will be intensive, demanding, and potentially dangerous. Master Sergeant Delgado's standards are based on combat requirements where failure meant death. Not everyone who begins the program will complete it successfully. Morrison stood up, indicating that the briefing was reaching its conclusion. You have 24 hours to decide whether you and your team are willing to accept this opportunity. If you decline, your security clearances will be upgraded to prevent disclosure of what you've learned, but no other action will be taken. If you accept, you'll be temporarily reassigned to a classified training program that doesn't officially exist. Torres also stood, his expression mixing command authority with personal concern. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, I want you to understand that this isn't a typical training opportunity. What you'll learn could make you among the most capable marksmen in the world, but it will also burden you with knowledge and capabilities that you'll carry for the rest of your career. Kate looked at each of the officials in turn, understanding that this moment would define not just her future, but the futures of her recruits. Sir, can I consult with my team before making this decision? Morrison nodded. In fact, we insist on it. This program requires unanimous consent from all participants. Master Sergeant Delgado was very specific about that requirement. She won't train anyone who isn't completely committed to the process. Wright headed toward the door, then paused. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, one final consideration. If you accept this training, you'll be learning from someone who represents a living link to capabilities that were paid for with the lives of some of the most dedicated soldiers in military history. That knowledge comes with responsibilities that extend far beyond your individual career or personal achievement. As the officials left her office, Kate sat alone contemplating a decision that would change everything. Outside her window, the desert stretched endlessly toward the mountains, and somewhere in that landscape, a legend waited to see if the current generation was worthy of carrying forward knowledge that had been preserved at an almost unimaginable cost. The question now was whether Kate and her team possessed the courage, dedication, and character necessary to prove themselves worthy of that trust. 24 hours later, Kate stood with her 4 recruits in the pre-dawn darkness of the Nevada desert, their decision made and their commitment absolute. Each soldier had wrestled with the implications of accepting classified training that officially didn't exist, but in the end, the opportunity to learn from a living legend had proven irresistible. Master Sergeant Delgado emerged from the darkness at exactly 0500 hours, no longer the mysterious observer, but now clearly revealed as their instructor. She carried the same worn rifle case, but her demeanor had shifted to reflect her new role, still quiet and composed, but now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone preparing to share knowledge that had been earned through blood and sacrifice. Before we begin, Delgado said, her voice carrying easily in the still morning air, I need each of you to understand what you're committing to. The techniques I'm going to teach you were developed by 6 women who believe that some knowledge is worth dying for. They paid the ultimate price to perfect methods that could save lives in situations where conventional tactics fail. She set down her rifle case and looked directly at each soldier. This isn't advanced marksmanship training. This isn't competition shooting or recreational precision work. What you're about to learn are combat techniques designed for situations where mission failure means death, yours, your teammates, or innocent civilians who are depending on your ability to achieve the impossible. Lucas stepped forward slightly, his analytical mind engaging with the challenge ahead. Master Sergeant, what are the specific learning objectives for this training program? Delgado opened her rifle case and began assembling her weapon with the fluid precision Kate remembered from their first encounter. You're going to learn to engage targets at ranges that conventional doctrine considers impossible. You're going to master environmental compensation techniques that account for variables most snipers never consider. You're going to develop the ability to coordinate precision fire with teammates under conditions that would break conventional units. She finished assembling her rifle and shouldered it, her stance transforming into something that spoke of decades of combat experience. But most importantly, you're going to learn to think like problem solvers instead of marksmen. You're going to understand that every impossible shot is just a physics problem waiting for the right solution. Taylor raised a hesitant hand. Master Sergeant, the equipment we witnessed you using, is that part of the training program? Will we have access to similar capabilities? You'll learn to achieve extraordinary results with conventional equipment. Delgado replied. The rifle I'm using was built from standard components, modified through techniques that any competent armorer can implement. The ammunition is hand-loaded using commercially available components. The scope is 15 years old. What makes the difference isn't the equipment, it's the understanding of how to push conventional tools beyond their apparent limitations. Riley, characteristically direct, asked the question the others were thinking. Master Sergeant, how long did it take Shadow Strike Team to develop these capabilities? Delgado's expression grew distant, touched by memories that were clearly both proud and painful. 2 years of intensive development, followed by 18 months of combat testing and refinement. But you have an advantage my original team didn't. Have your learning proven techniques instead of developing them from theoretical concepts. She led them to a training area that Kate had never seen before, despite 3 years of working at Blackwood. Hidden behind a series of natural rock formations, the setup included target arrays at distances she couldn't even estimate, environmental monitoring equipment that looked far more sophisticated than standard military issue, and shooting positions that had been carefully engineered to simulate urban combat conditions. This facility was built for Shadow Strike Team training, Delgado explained, noting their surprised expressions. It's been maintained in classified status since 2008, waiting for the right circumstances and the right personnel to justify reactivation. Danny whistled softly as he surveyed the elaborate training complex. Master Sergeant, this looks like something from a science fiction movie. How did they build all this without anyone knowing about it? The same way they developed techniques that officially don't exist, Delgado replied with what might have been a smile. Through very careful compartmentalization of information and very generous block budget allocations. She led them to the first training station, where targets were positioned at what appeared to be impossible angles behind various obstacles. Traditional sniper training teaches you to engage targets you can see along direct lines of sight. Shadow strike techniques teach you to engage targets you need to hit, regardless of whether you can see them directly. Kate studied the setup, her mind racing through the geometric implications. Master Sergeant, are you talking about ricochet shooting? Indirect fire using ballistic deflection? I'm talking about applied physics, Delgado corrected. Every surface has predictable deflection characteristics. Every projectile has known ballistic properties. When you combine mathematical precision with intuitive understanding of environmental factors, you can engage targets that conventional wisdom considers impossible to reach. She moved to a shooting position and gestured for Lucas to join her. Webb, what do you see when you look at that target array? Lucas studied the setup through his scope. I see targets positioned behind concrete barriers, with no direct line of sight from this firing position. The angles would require at least 2 deflections to reach the intended targets, and the mathematical calculations would be ... extremely complex. Complex but achievable, Delgado confirmed. The key is understanding that ricochet isn't luck or chance, it's applied physics. Every deflection follows predictable laws of motion and energy transfer. When you understand those laws completely, you can use them to extend your engagement capability far beyond conventional limitations. She settled into her firing position and fired a single shot. Kate watched through her binoculars as the bullet struck a metal plate at a precisely calculated angle, deflected to a second surface, and then impacted a target that had been completely hidden from the shooting position. The mathematical calculations are complex, Delgado acknowledged, but they become instinctive with sufficient practice. Your minds will learn to process deflection angles, energy loss coefficients, and environmental variables without conscious calculation. Taylor looked up from frantic note-taking. "Master Sergeant, how long does it typically take to develop that level of instinctive calculation? For soldiers with your foundational skills and analytical capabilities? 6 weeks of intensive training should give you basic proficiency. True mastery takes years, but basic proficiency is sufficient for most operational requirements." Rayleigh asked the practical question. What happens if we can't master these techniques? What if some of us aren't capable of learning to this level? Delgado's expression grew serious. "Then you'll return to conventional training with enhanced appreciation for the complexities involved in extreme precision shooting. There's no shame in reaching your limits. There's shame in not pushing yourself to discover what those limits actually are." She led them to the next training station, where the challenges appeared even more daunting. "Kate, you and your team have 6 weeks to prove that current generation soldiers can master techniques that took my team 2 years to develop. The question isn't whether the techniques work. We proved that conclusively. The question is whether you have the dedication, intelligence, and character necessary to carry forward knowledge that 5 remarkable women died protecting." As the morning training session began in earnest, Kate realized that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. They were no longer conventional soldiers learning advanced marksmanship. They were inheritors of a legacy that carried responsibilities extending far beyond their individual careers or personal achievements. The legend had become their teacher, and now it was time to discover whether they were worthy of the knowledge she was prepared to share. 3 weeks into the intensive training program, Kate felt like her understanding of marksmanship had been completely reconstructed from the ground up. What had once seemed like advanced shooting techniques now appeared elementary compared to the capabilities Delgado was teaching them. Each day brought new challenges that pushed the boundaries of what they had thought possible with conventional weapons and human skill. Lucas had proven to be exceptionally gifted at the mathematical aspects of extreme-range shooting, his engineering background allowing him to internalize the complex calculations required for multi-surface ricochet shots. Taylor's technological aptitude had evolved beyond reliance on digital aids to an intuitive understanding of environmental factors that could be assessed without instruments. Danny's natural instincts for reading weather patterns had developed into an almost supernatural ability to predict wind changes and atmospheric variations. Rayleigh's methodical approach had yielded the most consistent accuracy under pressure, demonstrating the kind of reliability that mission success often depended upon. But it was Kate who surprised everyone, including herself, by displaying leadership capabilities that reminded Delgado of the team coordination skills that had made Shadow Strike Team legendary. Her ability to coordinate multiple shooters, assign targets based on each soldier's strengths, and maintain tactical awareness during complex engagements had earned grudging approval from their demanding instructor. "You're ready for field application," Delgado announced on a Thursday morning that started like any other training session but would end with real-world consequences that none of them could have anticipated. Not ready for independent operations, but ready to apply these techniques under actual operational conditions. Kate felt her pulse quicken. "Master Sergeant, are you saying we're going to be deployed?" "I'm saying that circumstances have developed that require immediate application of Shadow Strike capabilities," Delgado replied, her tone carrying the weight of urgent necessity. "There's a situation developing that conventional assets cannot resolve, and higher command has determined that your team represents the only available resource with the specific skills required for mission success." Colonel Torres appeared at the training facility entrance, accompanied by the same intelligence officials who had briefed Kate 3 weeks earlier. Their expressions carried the gravity of personnel dealing with a crisis that required immediate action. "Staff Sergeant Sullivan," Morrison called out, "we need to brief your team on an operational requirement that has developed faster than anyone anticipated." The briefing took place in a secure conference room that Kate hadn't known existed within the training complex. Maps, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports covered every available surface, painting a picture of complexity that made Kate's stomach tighten with apprehension. Wright began the operational briefing with characteristic directness. 18 hours ago, American journalists were taken hostage by a militant group operating in an urban area of Syria. Intelligence indicates they're being held in a compound that makes conventional rescue operations extremely difficult. Morrison activated a large display screen showing detailed satellite imagery of the target area. The compound is located in a dense urban environment with multiple levels, narrow streets, and civilian structures on all sides. The hostages are being held in a central courtyard that has no direct lines of sight from any feasible assault positions. Torres pointed to specific features on the imagery. Airstrikes are not an option due to civilian casualties and the risk to hostages. Ground assault would require fighting through heavily defended urban terrain with unacceptable probability of mission failure and friendly casualties. Wright continued, however, intelligence analysis suggests that precision elimination of key personnel from extreme ranges could create conditions for successful hostage extraction. The required shooting positions are approximately 3,800 to 4,200 meters from target areas with engagement angles that would require indirect fire capabilities. Kate felt the pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. You're saying this mission requires exactly the techniques we've been learning. Shadow strike capabilities applied under real-world combat conditions. Morrison nodded grimly. The mission planners have reviewed every available asset and capability. Your team represents the only resource with the training, skills, and equipment necessary to engage targets at the required ranges under the specified conditions. Delgado spoke for the first time since the briefing began, her voice carrying the weight of experience with impossible missions. The tactical situation mirrors operations that Shadow Strike team conducted successfully in Iraq. The techniques are proven. The question is whether your team is ready to implement them under combat stress. Riley raised a hand tentatively. Master. Sergeant, how long do we have to prepare for deployment? 6 hours, Wright replied. The hostage situation is deteriorating rapidly. Intelligence suggests the militants are planning to move the hostages to a less accessible location within the next 24 hours. If we're going to act, it has to be immediate. Danny looked around the room, his usual humor completely absent. So we're going from training to actual combat operations with American lives hanging in the balance? That's exactly what you're doing, Torres confirmed. And I need each of you to understand that this isn't a training exercise with safety nets and second chances. Mission failure means American journalists die, and potentially American soldiers die trying to extract them through conventional means. Lucas, ever analytical, asked the technical questions. What's our mission-specific equipment situation? Are we using our training weapons or will specialized equipment be provided? Morrison opened the equipment case that revealed weapons and optics that looked far more sophisticated than anything they had trained with. You'll have access to optimized equipment, specialized ammunition, and support assets that weren't available during your training period. However, the fundamental techniques remain identical to what you've been practicing. Kate looked at each of her team members, seeing the mixture of excitement, fear, and determination in their faces. What happens if we decline this mission? What are the alternatives? Wright's expression grew grim. Conventional special operations assault with high probability of casualties on both sides, or diplomatic negotiations that intelligence suggests have minimal chance of success. Neither option offers acceptable probability of positive outcome. Delgado stood up, her slight frame somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Staff Sergeant Sullivan, this is why shadow strike techniques were developed. This is why my team spent 2 years perfecting capabilities that officially don't exist. Some situations require solutions that conventional doctrine cannot provide. Kate, felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. American lives depended on techniques that her team had been learning for 3 weeks, applied under combat conditions against an enemy that would show no mercy for mistakes or hesitation. "How long do we have to make this decision?" she asked. Morrison checked her watch. "Deployment begins in 4 hours. We need your answer in 30 minutes to allow time for final mission planning and equipment preparation." Kate looked at her team one final time. "I need to consult with my soldiers before committing to an operation of this significance." Torres nodded. "Take all the time you need. But remember that while you're deciding, American citizens are counting on capabilities that only your team possesses." As the officials left the conference room, Kate faced the most important decision of her military career: whether to risk everything on techniques that 3 weeks ago she had never imagined possible, applied under conditions where failure would be measured in American lives lost. The Syrian desert at 0300 hours was a landscape of shadows and silence, broken only by the distant sound of the extraction helicopter that had deposited Kate's team at their insertion point 12 kilometers from the target compound. Each soldier carried equipment that represented the pinnacle of precision shooting technology, but more importantly, they carried 3 weeks of intensive training in techniques that officially didn't exist. Kate lay prone on a rooftop 4,100 meters from the target area, her modified rifle system providing crystal-clear imagery of the compound where 3 American journalists were being held by militants who had proven immune to diplomatic pressure. Through her advanced scope, she could see guards positioned at locations that made conventional assault impossible without unacceptable casualties. "Overwatch 1 in position," she whispered into her communication system, using the call sign that connected her to the most important mission of her career. Around the compound, her team had established shooting positions that created overlapping fields of fire, covering every critical target area. "Overwatch 2 in position," Lucas reported from his location, 3,850 meters southwest of the compound. His analytical mind had calculated environmental factors with the precision that Delgado had taught them, accounting for wind patterns, temperature variations, and atmospheric conditions that would affect extreme-range shooting. "Overwatch 3 ready," Taylor confirmed from a position that provided the most technically challenging shots of the operation. The technology specialist had learned to trust instinct over instruments, applying environmental compensation techniques that pushed the boundaries of human capability. "Overwatch 4 set," Danny called in from his elevated position that offered oversight of the compound's rear approaches. His natural ability to read weather patterns had developed into an almost supernatural understanding of environmental factors that could affect precision shooting. Riley's voice came through the communication system with characteristic calm. "Overwatch 5 in position and ready for coordination." Master Sergeant Delgado's voice provided the tactical coordination that would mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "All positions confirm visual on primary targets. We have 6 guards in elevated positions, 4 roving patrols, and command personnel in the central building. Hostages are confirmed in the courtyard area with 2 guards in direct proximity." Kate studied the tactical situation through her scope, applying everything she had learned about problem solving under impossible conditions. The guards were positioned to provide mutual support and overlapping coverage that would make conventional sniper operations ineffective. But shadow strike techniques offered solutions that conventional doctrine couldn't provide. "Overwatch 1 has visual on target Alpha," Kate reported, identifying a guard position that could only be engaged through ricochet shooting, using the concrete wall deflection techniques they had practiced. Engagement angle requires 2 surface deflection with environmental compensation for crosswind at estimated 12 knots. Lucas confirmed his target assignment. "Overwatch 2 has target Bravo, direct line of sight blocked, but ricochet off metal staircase should provide engagement opportunity. Calculating deflection angles now." The coordination that followed demonstrated the kind of tactical precision that had made Shadow Strike Team legendary. Each shooter identified targets that were impossible to engage through conventional means, but achievable using the advanced techniques they had mastered during their intensive training. "Execute on my mark," Delgado commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had coordinated similar operations under combat conditions. "Remember, this isn't about perfect shots. It's about mission completion. Adapt, improvise, and ensure those hostages go home alive." Kate controlled her breathing, applied every environmental compensation technique she had learned, and prepared to fire a shot that would either validate weeks of training or result in mission failure, with consequences too terrible to contemplate. "Mark!" The coordinated volley that followed was a masterpiece of precision shooting and tactical coordination. Kate's shot ricocheted off two surfaces to eliminate a guard, who thought he was safely concealed behind concrete barriers. Lucas engaged. His target threw a deflection that used the compound's metal infrastructure to achieve an impossible angle of attack. Taylor's shot demonstrated the kind of environmental compensation that pushed human capability beyond theoretical limitations. Danny and Riley provided overwatch and target coordination that ensured no threats were missed and no opportunities were wasted. The entire engagement lasted less than 40 seconds, but it represented the culmination of techniques that had been developed through years of combat experience and refined through the sacrifice of soldiers who had died believing their knowledge could save future lives. "All targets neutralized," Delgado confirmed as the extraction team moved into the compound to secure the hostages. "Ground team reports all American personnel are alive and uninjured. Mission success." The helicopter extraction that followed was a blur of professional efficiency and carefully controlled emotion. Kate found herself sitting across from the three journalists, whose lives had depended on her team's ability to achieve the impossible, and she struggled to process the reality that techniques she had learned 3 weeks ago had just saved American lives under actual combat conditions. "Outstanding work," Colonel Wright told them during the flight back to the forward operating base. "The precision demonstrated today represents capabilities that could revolutionize special operations doctrine. The techniques you applied under combat stress have just proven their value in ways that no training exercise could validate." Master Sergeant Delgado sat quietly in the corner of the helicopter, her expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had successfully passed critical knowledge to a new generation of soldiers. "Your team performed exactly as Shadow Strike Team would have performed," she told Kate over the engine noise. "You understood that impossible situations require impossible solutions, and you proved worthy of the knowledge that my original team died protecting." Kate looked at each of her soldiers, seeing the mixture of exhaustion, pride, and profound satisfaction that comes from achieving something that pushes the boundaries of human capability. They had entered the mission as students of advanced marksmanship techniques, but they were returning as inheritors of a legacy that carried responsibilities extending far beyond their individual careers. "What happens now?" Riley asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Delgado's answer was simple but profound. "Now you become teachers. You preserve the knowledge, train the next generation, and ensure that capabilities this important are never lost to bureaucracy or institutional memory." As the helicopter carried them away from the mission area, Kate realized that they had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. They were no longer conventional soldiers who had learned advanced techniques. They were living links to capabilities that existed because remarkable people had been willing to sacrifice everything to develop them. 6 months after the Syrian operation, Kate stood at the entrance to Range 7 at Blackwood Military Training Complex, watching a new group of recruits set up their equipment with the casual confidence of soldiers who thought they understood what precision shooting meant. The scene was achingly familiar, Young men and women convinced that modern training and advanced technology had prepared them for any challenge the military might present. But now Kate knew better. She knew that the most dangerous person in any engagement might be the one who appeared least threatening. She knew that legends sometimes walked among them, carrying knowledge that could save lives if they were wise enough to recognize it. Most importantly, she knew that the techniques which had once seemed impossible were simply advanced applications of physics, mathematics, and human capability pushed beyond conventional limitations. Staff Sergeant Sullivan called out Private Jessica Martinez, fresh from basic training and eager to prove herself in the advanced marksmanship program. Is it true that someone once made a successful shot at over 4,000 meters from this range? Kate smiled, remembering a time when she might have dismissed such a claim as military folklore or exaggerated war stories. Private Martinez, let me tell you about the importance of keeping an open mind about what's possible when skill meets determination. She gestured toward the distant target that had once seemed impossible, now permanently designated as the Shadow Strike Memorial Target, in honor of techniques that had been preserved through sacrifice and validated through successful mission completion. That target represents more than just a challenging shot. It represents the principle that human capability can exceed theoretical limitations when properly applied. Private David Kim, the squad's analytical perfectionist, raised his hand with the kind of technical question that reminded Kate of Lucas during their early training. Sergeant Sullivan, what would be required to successfully engage a target at that range? The mathematical calculations alone seemed prohibitively complex. Kate had been expecting this question, just as she had been expecting the skepticism that would naturally follow her answer. Kim, the calculations are complex, but they're achievable. More importantly, the techniques required to make such shots have been proven under actual combat conditions. She pulled out a photograph that had become one of her most treasured possessions. An image of her team with Master Sergeant Delgado after their successful mission, all of them wearing the quiet satisfaction of soldiers who had achieved something extraordinary. This photograph was taken after a classified operation where techniques that most people consider impossible were used to save American lives. Private Torres, the unit's designated skeptic, responded with the kind of dismissive confidence that Kate recognized from her own past. With respect, Sergeant, that sounds like another military legend. These stories always grow in the telling. Kate nodded thoughtfully, remembering when she might have agreed with Torres' assessment. Torres, you think legends are just exaggerated stories? Most of the time, yeah. People want to believe in heroes and impossible achievements, so they see what they want to see. Kate pulled out her radio and made a call that had become part of her standard training routine. Phantom, this is Blackwood Range Control. We have some young soldiers here who could benefit from a demonstration of advanced marksmanship techniques. Are you available for a teaching moment? The response came through clearly enough for the recruits to hear. Copy, Blackwood. I'm 5 minutes out. Set up the extreme range targets. Torres looked confused as Kate began arranging the target array that he had never seen used during conventional training sessions. Sergeant, who exactly did you just call? Someone who learned that respect is earned through competence, not conversation, Kate replied, setting up the final target at a distance that made Torres squint to see it clearly. Someone who understands that the most important lessons often come from people who have earned the right to remain quiet about their qualifications. At exactly 5 minutes, Master Sergeant Delgado appeared at the range entrance, moving with the same unhurried precision that Kate remembered from their first encounter. She carried her ancient rifle case and wore the same unremarkable appearance that had once fooled Kate into underestimating her capabilities. The recruits' reactions were predictably dismissive. That's our expert shooter, Torres whispered to Martinez. She looks like someone's grandmother who got lost on the way to the commissary. Kate watched Delgado approach the firing line with quiet dignity, remembering her own initial skepticism and the profound lesson that had followed. "Pay attention," she told her recruits. "You're about to witness something that will change your understanding of what human capability looks like." Delgado assembled her rifle with the fluid precision that spoke of decades of practice, then settled into a shooting position that demonstrated the kind of technical mastery that could only come from extensive combat experience. She spent several minutes studying the target through her scope, making minute adjustments that accounted for environmental factors the recruits couldn't even identify. "Range is clear," Kate announced, falling naturally into the role of range safety officer. "Shooter, you are cleared to fire when ready." The shot that followed was identical to the one that had changed Kate's life 6 months earlier, a single round that traveled 4,200 meters through variable desert conditions to detonate a target that conventional wisdom declared impossible to hit. The explosion was visible even without optics, a cloud of smoke and debris that provided unmistakable confirmation of success. The silence that followed was the silence of minds trying to process something that contradicted everything they thought. They knew about the limits of human performance. Torres stared at the dissipating smoke cloud, his casual arrogance replaced by stunned disbelief. "How?" Martinez asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Delgado calmly ejected the spent cartridge and began disassembling her rifle. Physics, mathematics, experience, and understanding that impossible is often just another word for requiring perfect execution under perfect conditions. She packed her equipment with the same methodical precision she had shown throughout the demonstration, then addressed the recruits directly. "The techniques you just witnessed were developed by soldiers who believe that some knowledge is worth preserving, even when the cost of learning it is higher than anyone should pay. Those techniques have been used successfully in combat operations to save American lives." Kim found his voice first. "Master Sergeant, would you be willing to teach us?" Delgado looked at Kate, who nodded encouragingly. "That depends. Are you prepared to learn that everything you think you know about marksmanship is just the beginning? Are you willing to trust techniques developed by people who face situations where failure meant death?" The recruits nodded eagerly, their initial skepticism replaced by hungry curiosity and newfound respect for capabilities they hadn't imagined possible. "Then we'll start tomorrow at 0500, Delgado said simply. "Bring your rifles, your best intentions, and leave your assumptions about what's possible in the barracks." As Delgado walked away from the range, Kate turned back to her speechless recruits. The lesson had been delivered with characteristic efficiency, not through lectures or theoretical discussions, but through undeniable demonstration of human capability pushed beyond conventional limitations. "Any questions about the relationship between appearance and ability?" Kate asked. The recruits shook their heads in unison, finally understanding that legends don't need their names in lights or their achievements publicly acknowledged. They just need students worthy of carrying forward the knowledge they've preserved. That evening, Kate received a message that made her smile with satisfaction and pride. It was from one of the journalists her team had rescued in Syria, now safely back in the United States and working on a story about unsung heroes in the military. "I don't know who you are or what techniques you used," the message read, "but I want you to know that 3 families have their loved ones home because of your capabilities. Thank you for proving that impossible is just another word for challenging." Kate looked out her office window at the desert landscape where legends had been born, tested, and passed to a new generation. Master Sergeant Delgado was visible in the distance, conducting her evening reflection at the place where the impossible target had once stood. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that excellence doesn't announce itself. It simply demonstrates, teaches, and trusts the next generation to prove worthy of the gift. And in the growing darkness of the Nevada desert, the legacy of Shadow Strike Team continued to live on, carried forward by soldiers who understood that true legends don't need recognition. They just need to know that what they taught will keep people safe. The quiet ones had earned the right to remain quiet, but their knowledge would never be silent again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.